Welcome to a voyage across the open seas, propelled by the winds of time into an era that stitched together the continents and cultures of our worlds. Prepare to hoist your sails and brace against the rolling waves of history as I delve into an epoch that changed the course of human civilization. Today, we're going to unearth the roots of the Age of Sail, the technology that powered it, and the global impact it left in its way. And we're going to talk about how you can use it in a fantasy world by injecting magic and mythology. Welcome to another episode of Eras Defined from Just in Time Worlds with your host, Marie Mullaney. Just before we dive into the video, I will be in San Diego for Comic-Con this year and selling signed copies of Sangwheel Chronicles Book 1 and 2. If you want to pick up a signed copy, come look for me and my podcast partner Drake in the small press area, stalls Q1 and Q3. If you want a signed copy but you can't be there, or you want to ensure that you get a signed copy in case I sell out, there is a link to pre-order on my Ko-fi page, which is in the information card now and linked down below. I will mail out pre-orders after Comic-Con if you don't pick up your order there. Okay, enough of that. Let's talk about the Age of Sail. First, we should ask, what was the Age of Sail? The term Age of Sail refers to the period in history when international trade and naval warfare were dominated by sailing ships. This spans the period from the 16th century to the mid-19th century, and it was marked by robust exploration of the world's oceans, burgeoning global trade, and dramatic naval conflicts. A whole constellation of factors brought to life the Age of Sail. The discovery of new trade routes was one such factor, with explorers and merchants yearning to find more efficient paths to the riches of Asia and the Americas. I spoke about this need for finding alternative routes when I discussed overland trade routes, specifically the spice route, which you can check out in the information card. The most famous example of this type of voyage was perhaps Christopher Columbus's voyage in 1492, when he was seeking India and instead he stumbled over America. This laid the groundwork for the transatlantic trade networks that would later define the Age of Sail. The birth of the Age of Sail was no accident. It was fueled by a potent blend of curiosity, ambition, and technological advancements, born from, everything that had come before it. The age of exploration that had immediately preceded the Age of Sail had ignited a global curiosity in the Europeans. Monarchs, merchants, and mariners alike were eager to chart unknown territories. The thirst for discovery was not merely for its own sake, but also driven by the promise of wealth and power. A potent symbol of this time was Vasco da Gama's successful voyage around the Cape of Good Hope to India in 1498, which broke the monopoly of the overland trade routes and opened a direct sea route to Asia's spices and silks. But the Age of Sail wouldn't have been possible without significant advancement in navigational technology and ship designs. After all, the Gama hugged Africa's coast all the way to India, but Columbus set out straight across the ocean blue. And that was because of innovation like the magnetic compass, which was adapted from the Chinese models, and gave sailors the ability to navigate more accurately than ever before. Similarly, the astrolabe, with its roots in ancient Greek and Islamic science, was an instrumental device for determining latitude at sea. And I spoke quite a lot about navigation in my earlier video about sea-based trade routes in the information card, so go ahead and check that out for more detail on navigation instruments and the required technology for various forms of navigation. Leading up to the Age of Sail, ships themselves underwent impressive transformations, and I will speak more about those ships a little bit later when I delve into the technology. Trade opportunities played a pivotal role as well. The legendary Silk Road, the prime overland trade route, was a challenging and treacherous path to the wealth of the East. In contrast, the maritime spice trade routes, which sought coveted commodities like cloves, cinnamon, and nutmeg, offered new economic opportunities and potential for vast wealth. A lesser known yet significant trade was in dyes, and when the cochineal insect, native to Central and South America and a producer of vivid red dye, hit Europe's markets, well, that little creature was worth its weight in gold and well worth the risk of sailing across the ocean. So if you're building out your age of sail, think of all the technological innovations you'll need, but also consider the state of trade. You have to have a fairly wealthy market that people can sell goods to, or there just won't be a reason to take the risks of a long sea voyage so far from land. Basically, if you're going to have an age of sail, somewhere there has to be rich people who are hungry for resources that the sailors can bring back with them. If you enjoyed that discussion of what the Age of Sail was and kind of the events that led up to it, hit the thumbs up button and let's talk about those technologies that were used in the Age of Sail. This age saw some of the most significant technological advancements in history. And they were not just limited to shipbuilding and navigation, but extended to weapons technology and to methods of communication. First, we must talk about ships. The Caravel, an agile and seaworthy ship of Portuguese origin, was a game changer. Its lateen sails allowed for unprecedented maneuverability and specifically sailing upwind, which made it the vessel of choice for many early explorers, including Columbus himself. As the age of sail advanced, larger, more robust ships came to the fore, like the iconic Spanish galleon. Boasting multiple gun decks and the ability to carry substantial cargo, the galleon became the symbol of sea dominance. Later, the frigate emerged, a swift and heavily armed warship that would play a crucial role in naval warfare right up until the advent of steam. Fun fact, the USS Constitution, a famous American frigate built in 1797, is still afloat and can be visited in Boston today. I did also speak about some of these ships and specifically sloops during my video on piracy during this period, which you can also check out in the information cards. In terms of navigation, the compass, as we've mentioned, was a pivotal technology, but it wasn't alone. The backstaff, a device invented by John Davis in the 16th century, allowed navigators to measure the altitude of the sun without staring directly into it. The astrolabe, as I mentioned earlier, was gradually replaced by the quadrant and eventually the more accurate sextant. The sextant is a very precise instrument invented in the 18th century, and it could measure the angle between two visible objects, most often a celestial body and the horizon, which greatly improved sea navigation. Of course, weapons changed dramatically during this period, as gunpowder reshaped the world of warfare. Cannons mounted on the decks of ships were capable of unleashing devastating broadsides during naval battles. But don't forget about the flintlock muskets and cutlasses, the personal weapon of sailors and mariners. Cutlasses, in particular, were favored for their utility in close-quarter combat, both on deck and during boarding actions. And here's a little fun fact. The cutlass's shorter length was very handy on ship combat for avoiding accidentally striking the ship's rigging during a fight. And then on the communication front, signal flags, also known as maritime flags, were a language unto themselves. They allowed for complex messages to be transmitted visually from ship to ship or even from ship to shore. And when it was dark, lantern signals were another method used, particularly during the cover of darkness, obviously, or mirrors during daylight. And don't forget about logbooks, where each ship's captain would record the day's navigation, weather, and any significant events. a tradition carried forward even into Star Trek and science fiction. Interestingly, today those logbooks provide valuable sources of information for climate scientists studying the ways that our climate has changed over the centuries since the Age of Sail. So, if you're building out your Age of Sail, those are probably the main four categories of technology that you should consider. The ships themselves, of course. What do your ships look like? What do their sails look like specifically? Their weapons, navigation, and communication. And if you enjoyed that discussion of technology, hit the thumbs up button and let's talk about the impact that the Age of Sail had on the world. It left an indelible mark on our world's history, influencing not just maritime practices, but also reshaping cultures, economies, and even warfare. Its impact was truly global in every sense of the word. It pushed the boundaries of the known world to include the whole globe, culminating in Magellan's unprecedented circumnavigation of the world. On that note, Magellan himself actually didn't complete his full journey. He lost his life in the Philippines, leaving Juan Sebastian Elcano to finish the voyage. But I digress. Anyway, these explorations paved the way for the rise of European sea powers, specifically Spain, Portugal, England, and the Netherlands. These powers established extensive maritime empires, their influence echoing across the ocean. Spain's wealth, in particular, soared with the influx of gold and silver from the New World, while the British Empire's naval supremacy would eventually extend into the empire where the sun never sets on the Dominion. Of course, there is a dark side to all this exploration and new markets and these powers rising. Indigenous societies faced brutal colonization. Their cultures were suppressed or outright destroyed in some cases. Slavery was still an accepted practice during this time period, and many people ended up as slaves and were displaced to different continents. Human rights was not even a blip on the horizon yet, and pretty much people did what they wanted in very brutal fashion. This is something that you do need to bear in mind in your world. Unless your civilizations have got roughly equal levels of technology, one of them is probably going to oppress the other in the name of profit and conquest. Of course, in a fantasy world, magic can level that playing field quite handily, which is something that we will speak about. Or you could make some alterations to the way the society is structured so that when the explorers reach that far continent, maybe their method of empire building is more around the tributary system of the Bronze Ages rather than, say, the colonization method that Rome and later the European maritime powers employed. But either way, you should think about what happens when your people who are sending out the sailing ships encounter the civilizations, the indigenous civilizations on other continents, and what that first contact between those civilizations looks like, and what the long-term effects of those contacts are. The Age of Sail saw the birth of global trade on a scale never seen before. The spice trade from the East Indies, the silver of the New World, and the fur trade of North America created lucrative ventures that drove the world economy and made the sea routes hotly contested. On an interesting note there, Spain's massive success actually led to its downfall as well. It brought in so much silver from the New World that it gave itself a really bad case of inflation, and the Spanish Empire collapsed under the weight of that inflation. So to anyone who says you can't get inflation with precious metal-based coins, sorry, but you can, and Spain during this period proves it. On the battlefront, naval warfare evolved dramatically during this period. The Spanish Armada's defeat in 1588 highlighted the importance of maneuverability over sheer size, a lesson that reshaped naval strategies henceforth. Naval blockades became a powerful tool, able to choke an enemy's economy without ever setting foot on their soil. And the European maritime powers, especially Britain, used this tool of blockading very effectively. Now, I did say we would talk about magic. So let's talk about good magic systems for the age of sail and the impact of magic in terms of the way that societies interact with each other for the first time. There is already something really magical about sailing on a ship to start with. But of course, this is fantasy. So what if that magic is real? What magic systems would really work well during this period? Let's start with sea-based and wind-based magic. This form of magic would of course be an absolute winner. Imagine harnessing the power of sea and wind, manipulating currents or summoning gusts to drive your vessel through the waves at unbelievable speeds. Perhaps even sending storms to take down your enemies. This mastery over nature's raw forces could turn even the most formidable oceanic barriers into mere trifles. If good old Captain Kidd, notorious pirate extraordinaire, was a magic wielder of this nature, he probably would never have ended up in Execution Dock. But maybe you want a more subtle magic, something like drawing on celestial power to navigate with unerring precision, or divining the future from the movement of the stars. As ancient mariners used the North Star for guidance, your magical navigators could read the constellations like an open book and always know their path and know when to sail. Of course, that's not going to do you that much good in a battle, but for that you do have the ship and its crew to draw on. Every vessel, every man carries iron and blood in his own body, and those can be potential sources for magic, for protection, attack, or even enchantment. Imagine the terror of foes when they see an enchanted galleon, its iron hull nearly indestructible, and its crew imbued with superhuman strength from blood magic. But as I said earlier, magic can also be a great equalizer. The European explorers had a notable war-based technology advantage. But what if they came sailing into a harbor where warriors capable of turning into jaguars waited for them on land? Or what if they sailed into an eastern port where sorcerers could prevent their cannons from firing? So don't feel constrained by how things played out in our world. You're building a fantasy realm. Throw some magic into the mix and reimagine the outcomes. And speaking of fantasy, let's talk about the legends and the whispered stories by the light of the moon. In your world, it's not just a home to sailors and explorers, but it also hosts mythical entities, sea monsters, sirens, mermaids. Sailing on the high seas was already perilous, but now you could add truly fearsome beasts. You could have the kraken be a real thing. You could have a whirlpool where something like the Loch Ness monster lives. You could build immense leviathan sea creatures that can destroy a ship with a single swipe of its tail. And that, of course, would make sailing that much dangerous and the need for magic that much more intense. Of course, not every monster needs to be a monster. You could have sirens, and maybe if you have sirens, you could have music as a form of magic. So your spells could be done via songs. And in that case, having something like a siren as a mythological creature in your world could fit really well. Or, of course, you could have something like mermaids. Maybe mermaids could even be friendly. Maybe they could have a whole underwater civilization and they could be navigational guides for your ships, or they could rescue sailors who fall over the side. Or if you want to go darker, you could, of course, say that no, the mermaids actually drown sailors who fall over the edge of the ship. And of course, these creatures would create the mythology and legends of your world as well, which would of course inform things like your art and the stories that sailors tell each other. And all of this forms the rich tapestry of world building that you can draw on in creating your world's equivalent to the Age of Sail. And those are my thoughts on using the Age of Sail as an inspiration for fantasy world building. If you want to say thanks to this video, super thanks and membership is enabled. And do remember to check out those signed book options in my Ko-fi page. And if you enjoyed this video, check out my video on building seafaring communities. And I will see you soon for another one.